Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe and this is a one-on-one interview. We are joined once again by reporter at Sky Sports News, Dharmesh Sheth. Dharmesh, good to have you back on the channel. How are you doing?
Hello there, counting down the days. It's getting tiring now.
Still 2 weeks left.
A little over 2 weeks to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's been chaos so far, obviously, not just on the United front, but one of the most bizarre transfer windows I think I've ever seen, with the amount of spending from certain clubs, and we've got new leagues involved in this sort of gigantic spending as well. First of all, how has it been for you this transfer window so far? Because it's just been absolutely hectic, hasn't it?
Tiring. The most bizarre and crazy and busy one I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
You know what? You make a good point there about Saudi Arabia coming into the equation, and you know what? When the window closes in Europe on September the 1st at 11 p.m, we've still got another week of Saudi Pro League potential transfers to go. So it's over, but not quite, because I think a few clubs will feel a little bit exposed if there's big money going around. But then they can use it to their advantage as well, because there might be a few players who they haven't been able to get off the books, who they might still be able to get good money for if the Saudi Pro League come in then.
Yeah, well, we're going to be talking about some players United are trying to get off the books, definitely. But before that, let's talk about a couple of ins. Amrabat of Fiorentina was someone who, over a month ago, I think it was a long time ago, at the start of the window, you came on here and you said United are interested in him. Since then, pretty much everyone else has decided to agree with you. That seems like that, United clearly have an interest in Amrabat. But so two questions. Firstly, what is United's current status with that deal? Because it seemed like it was, maybe not agreed, but certainly doable a long time ago. And then secondly, in the last sort of 24, 48 hours, we're now hearing that Liverpool might be interested as well. What's your sort of current understanding of United's approach for Amrabat?
So if we start with United, the interest is definitely there. They are ready, we think, to do a deal. Fiorentina are aware of their interest. Significantly, we think that Sofyan Amrabat wants to make the move to Manchester United. He's only got a year left on his contract. Fiorentina have the option to extend for a further 12 months. But I think for all parties, it's probably the best timing for them to get the maximum transfer fee for him instead of letting him go into the final year. So United are definitely interested. But the information we keep getting around potential arrivals now for United is it's likely to depend on departures. And while, yes, they managed to sell Fred to Fenerbahce for 15 million euros all in, I'm told whether it was questionable if that was enough to be able to go straight back into the market to buy someone like Sofyan Amrabat, or indeed someone like Amadou Onana, who United have been linked with as well, but he would cost a lot more money, or whether United would still have to make even more sales to raise even more money to be able to go into the market to buy someone like Amrabat. So the interest 100% is definitely there. Erik ten Hag wants the player. He knows the player. Amrabat's played under him before at Utrecht. He knows exactly what he can do. I think he showed the world what he could do in the World Cup as well for Morocco. But yes, you're right. In the last 24 hours, there's interest emerging from Liverpool. Now, this information came from our colleague at Sky in Italy, Gianluca Di Marzio, who's got really good contacts, and he hits the bullseye on most of the transfer stories that he comes with. But he was saying that there's been initial contacts with intermediaries about Sofyan Amrabat from Liverpool. Now, cynics might point to Fiorentina being quite happy for news like that to be out there, because does that then push Manchester United into doing a deal, or do we take it at face value and Liverpool actually definitely want to sign Sofyan Amrabat? So one of those two things, I think you have to reflect both at this stage. But, up until this moment in time, our information is that Amrabat wants Manchester United. Now, if United can't do a deal and he wants to go to the Premier League, then if Liverpool can put a deal together and United can't, then there'll be a decision for him to make, and you can't rule it out. But yes, tentative interest, we think, from Liverpool, definite interest from Manchester United. It will just depend how this one pans out. Not only who Liverpool bring in, because I think they're bringing in someone already from Stuttgart, a midfielder called Endo, Japan international. Whether that rules out someone like Amrabat coming in. We'll have to wait and see. But then maybe for United will also may depend on whether there's departures and big money departures as well.
So just sort of as a follow up to that, then, in terms of big money departures, who are the options for that? I mean, the only one that springs to mind would be McTominay. He's the only player that I think in that, certainly in the midfield area, but really other than maybe a Sancho, who at the start of the window there were some rumours could be available if there was a big offer. I don't see that happening, and I think he's played quite well in pre-season. But is McTominay the one then where you're looking, you might get sort of around 40 million quid for him, which was probably the most you're going to get for anyone else now, isn't it?
I think the two that were looking like potential sales at the club were Maguire and McTominay. So it's whether they could get big money for either of those two players. But as it stands, they're both staying at the club. So hence why they can't raise those funds that would probably be required for them to go back into the market. Having said that, Joe, if you go back to last summer, United made, 3 pretty quick signings in Eriksen, Malacia and Lisandro Martinez. It's only really late in that transfer window where they brought in Casemiro and Antony. I think the season had already started. And some would argue that had they got those two players much earlier in the window, they wouldn't have spent or had to have spent as much as they did on those two players. And I think what happened in that transfer window, because it was almost Erik ten Hag going to the board after United had lost those opening 2 games, we need to do something here because, this is trouble at the moment. We haven't gone and got our primary targets. There was a whole Frankie de Jong saga that lasted almost the entire window. And that's what pushed back other signings, because Antony was a target right at the beginning of the window. And he probably would have come for much less money. But Ajax had every right to charge a bit more because United came in so late. And as a result, I think United have been almost playing catch up now, because in January, people were saying, right, Ronaldo's gone, United need to go in for a striker. But in the striking department and in midfield, they did the short-term option, didn't they? In Wout Weghorst and Marcel Sabitzer. Both have since left the club again. And then going into this summer, yes, the budgets are revalued again for the summer, but there's still a fall off from what happened at the end of last summer because of the overspend towards the end of the window. Hence why United have had these 3 targets that they had in mind, and it's come to around £170 million. And people are saying, look, this is Manchester United. They should be able to spend what they want, but they're always conscious of complying with financial fair play rules. That's always in the background when they're doing deals just now. But I think what happened last summer might have had an impact, not only on January, but on this summer as well.
Right, okay. So just you mentioned Onana a second ago. And obviously when you think of financial fair play, they bought him for, was it 33 million quid 12 months ago, Everton. So they're not going to want to sell him for much less than, well, maybe not double, but certainly in the region of 50 plus, you would think, if they're being forced to sell a player.
We heard the valuations around 60.
Well, surely that isn't possible for United this window, or do you think there's a way that could be done?
So. You wouldn't have thought so. I mean, the names that are being bandied around are the likes of Onana and Sofyan Amrabat. Yeah. Sofyan Amrabat will come, much less money than you'd have to spend on Onana. But like I said to you about, I'm always now, the more transfer windows I do, I always look at things a little bit more cynically than I used to. And the Liverpool interest in Fiorentina, I take it, number one, on face value, they're definitely interested. But then I look at it another way. This is in Fiorentina's interests to have an interest in another Premier League club, not least Liverpool, to push United. And by the same token, I just wonder whether the interest in Onana being out there is not such a bad thing for Manchester United if they're trying to sign Sofyan Amrabat for a certain fee. And maybe is that helping them, or do they think that's helping them to maybe bring the price down for Sofyan Amrabat? We've seen it with a few other deals so far this summer. The Caicedo deal was absolutely crazy. I mean, Chelsea felt it was a one-horse race, but Liverpool's deal was the only one agreed. So Brighton knew that for Chelsea to sign Caicedo, they'd have to go over £111 million, which they had no intention of doing. at any stage in this window. Yes, they were probably willing to go to 80, 90 plus add-ons. Not a British transfer record, but some of these things sometimes happen in the background that make me think, is this everything it seems to be? It could well be. We can take everything on face value and say this is a situation. But sometimes I'm thinking it's not going to be too bad for a club who are trying to sell a player to have someone else interested in that player.
Makes a lot of sense. And also it almost seemed as though like Brighton got a bit of a boost from the price that Declan Rice cost. Like now we've got this kind of benchmark of this is what a young, promising defensive midfielder costs. So, you know, it's not 80 million anymore. It's 105 to begin with. And then you put a bidding more on top of that. And that's how we've got this sort of 150.
Joe, the irony of it all is it might not have been the Declan Rice deal that forced Chelsea to go up that much. It would have had a factor, but the fact that Chelsea had to meet a release clause for Enzo Fernandez that was 106 million.
Maybe it's that.
The irony is that they end up having to break their own British transfer record to bring in Moises Caicedo, because Brighton might think, Declan Rice, and if Enzo Fernandez is worth that much, then so is Caicedo.
So actually, it was Fernandez that made Rice that, and then it was Rice that made Caicedo.
To be fair, Enzo Fernandez's one was a release clause, so it's slightly different. So people talk about Jack Grealish being £100 million, but that was what Aston Villa put down as the release clause, and that's what someone had to pay if they wanted to sign him.
Right?
Who's to say that Jack Grealish might not have gone for around 70 to 75 million had the release clause not been there?
Just on another player then, we talk about selling players and United's need to do that. You mentioned Harry Maguire before. I've got a few questions on this because, again, this is this sort of multifaceted kind of saga that we're seeing here. So initially it seemed as though he wasn't going to leave and, you know, he's going to fight for his place. Then all of a sudden we hear United have agreed a deal with West Ham and that Maguire is open to playing for West Ham. And then we hear rumours of this potential settlement of, you know, unpaid wages, and obviously he'd have to take a wage drop to go to West Ham. And then now the deal's off, you know, that's it. West Ham have got border waiting. Maguire's going to fight for his place. What's going on there? What's your understanding of that situation? Because, well, I've got a few questions. To start with, where are we up to with the Harry Maguire situation?
So, Joe, it depends who you believe, because we've got so many different parties almost putting out different things. So as it stands, Harry Maguire's move to West Ham United is not happening. That's as it stands. And he's going to fight for his place. He's still under contract at Manchester United. He doesn't have to go anywhere. And publicly, Erik ten Hag is happy that a player wants to stay and fight for his place. Conversely, yes, you might be happy that someone is ready to fight for their place, but against the backdrop of a club agreeing a deal with another club. So, you're happy he's staying, but you're happy to see him go as well. So that deal was agreed between clubs, £30 million. Kind of gets a little bit confusing because the information we were getting initially is that West Ham were happy with everything to do with that deal. They were happy with the club-to-club deal for £30 million for Harry Maguire, and they'd effectively agreed personal terms. All they were saying was, we are just waiting now for Manchester United and Harry Maguire because they are discussing his exit terms from Old Trafford. So that was where West Ham United stood. Then it emerged, no, he's not going to go to West Ham. And I think what West Ham felt was, well, we've agreed everything, but we're going to look at other options now because there's a situation where obviously he cannot sort out and agree and resolve the exit terms at Manchester United. However, then we started getting sources close to the player coming out and saying he wants to fight for his place. He loves the club. Erik ten Hag is happy that he's staying because he wants to fight for his place. And not once did he meet with David Moyes, and there was no agreement between Harry Maguire and West Ham United. So that's where the issue lies. That's why I'm saying to you, it depends which story you believe here, because we were getting conflicting stories from various sources on where we were with that deal. West Ham believing everything was done and they were ready to do a deal, but were just waiting for United. Whereas sources close to Maguire, not denying that there was a club-to-club agreement, but specifically saying, actually there's no agreement with West Ham United, and almost implying that that may be where the deal had broke down rather than between Manchester United and Harry Maguire.
It's amazing how political, and it's like I don't know, like some sort of White House drama, all of this, isn't it? Something from politics, right? Everyone, not just the Maguire transfer, but every transfer is, are they just doing this to get the price up? Are they doing this to get the price down? Obviously, Maguire, you wouldn't expect, not to say that anyone's not telling the truth, but you wouldn't expect Maguire's camp to come out and go, well, he's not leaving because he wants £6 million first. Because that doesn't make Maguire look great. Everything is just, is it real? Is it genuine? Is it just for the press? Is it? And like you said, you kind of have to look at what's happened in the past with other transfers and kind of make your own way through it.
Look, if I get information and people will just say, oh, what are you doing? You're just saying because you're supporting West Ham or you're supporting the United side or you're supporting the Maguire side. I will get information and I have to reflect all of the information that I get. If I'm getting information from all three parties, I can't just ignore one side of it. I have to relay what I know, and then it's up to the people when they read it to decide what they think. But I have to take the most of it on face value. So I will say West Ham thought they'd got a deal done.
Yeah.
Sources close to Harry Maguire suggested that that wasn't the case. Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag is happy that he's staying because he's going to fight for his place.
Yeah.
So there is something not quite right when you look at all three of those views. Who is right and who isn't? People always say all three parties will claim, no, this is the 100% what's happened.
It's bizarre. Do you still think, maybe not to West Ham, but including West Ham, do you think there's still a way Maguire can leave? Because I did see one story in the sort of midst of this kind of West Ham breaking down situation of people saying United don't, or it was a journalist, I don't remember who it was, saying that United don't think they'll have time to replace him now. But there's 2 weeks left of the window. United got 2 deals done in the last 2 weeks of the window last year. That's it. What is going on here? Do you think he could still leave, and would we have time to replace him?
So that was information I was being told as well. In that the timing of him staying now and being able to sell him and bring someone else in is going to be tight. I was never told that it's impossible because with transfers, you never say never. Anything can still happen. With regard to West Ham United, can it happen? It looks unlikely now, but I would never, ever say that deal is off because you knew that there was an agreement between the clubs. However, it is true that West Ham have moved on to other targets, and it appears now that they are close to an agreement with Stuttgart over the former Arsenal defender and the Greek international Konstantinos Mavropanos. So West Ham are close to doing that deal. If they were to bring him in, you would probably think they wouldn't be able to do or wouldn't want to do a deal for Harry Maguire. Now, with regard to being able to do other deals, Manchester United are a massive club. If there is a situation where they're agreeing a deal with Harry Maguire and it's a case that they would want to bring in somebody else if he was to leave, they would be working on these deals in the background for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I'm sure that if in the last couple of weeks they decided that there is a deal to be done for Harry Maguire and he leaves, I wouldn't be surprised if they're ready to rock and roll with another deal straight away, because they can't put themselves in that position to, let's sell before the end of the window and not bring in any more cover. I just can't see that would happen, even though I think, everyone is just trying to be a little bit cagey, which you would expect them to be, because it's a situation where, as it stands, he's staying. Can he leave in the remainder of the window? There is a possibility that he could leave. I think Maguire needs to look at his situation as well, because if you go back to the Monday Night Football against Wolves, I mean, one game is not the greatest sample size, Joe, but what we saw was effectively in that first game, Harry Maguire was the fourth choice centre-back.
Yeah.
Because Rafael Varane and Lisandro Martinez started, Lisandro came off at halftime, Victor Lindelof came on, and Harry Maguire was an unused substitute. Last season, he was even further down the pecking order behind those three players that I mentioned, and also Erik ten Hag choosing to use Luke Shaw. and deploy him in the central defensive position ahead of Harry Maguire. And Harry Maguire this time probably could have, not comfortable, but was okay maybe in one sense last season because there was no tournament in the summer to worry about. However, this time he will probably need to be playing much more than he was last season to have a chance of not only being in the squad, but being in the first 11 for Gareth Southgate in the Euros.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? There's so much going on. And I agree with all of that, by the way. And I think that it is probably best for him to leave. And I know you didn't say that, but I would go as far as to say that. But then on the other hand, there's part of me that thinks, if someone came to you now, Dharmesh, and said, it's not really working out at Sky, obviously it is, but it's not really working out at Sky. We want you to come work for this really small broadcaster instead and get paid half the money. You might think, well, actually, no, I've got a contract with Sky. I like it. Like, what's in it for me to leave and go and work somewhere that is not as good for less money? I think people assume footballers just, have got this extra pride and they want to play every week. But we've seen from what's going on in Saudi Arabia, what's happened in the past with other clubs, that, money is a big driver in football still. And
it's a principle thing as well. And it's what you think your worth is. So it doesn't, if you take out the huge numbers that would be involved, and people will just say, why doesn't he just join? Because he may be getting half the wages, but he'll still be on over £100,000 a week. But sometimes it's a principle thing as well, and what you think you're worth. So regardless of whether you're paid £10 a day and that reduces to £5, or you're paid £1 million a week and that reduces to £500,000 a week, that in itself is, well, do they not value me as much as I'm valued at the moment? There's that element of it as well.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. It seems as though United's transfer window was going so smoothly. We've got Onana, seemed to be our first choice keeper. We've got Højlund, who maybe we wanted a bigger name as well, but he was a name right from the start of the window that we clearly wanted. Mason Mount, another one. We went early, we got him early. Deal's done, the squad's looking better. Now all of a sudden, that performance against Wolves wasn't good at all. And there still seems to be gaps. We've only got one defensive midfielder at the club, and that's Casemiro. Everyone else is kind of an 8 or being squashed in. We've got Maguire, who United clearly want to sell because they've agreed deals with West Ham, and he doesn't want to leave. We're entering this period now where it seems like things aren't right. What do you think Ten Hag is thinking in all of this? Is he frustrated? Is he, coming out publicly saying Maguire can fight for his place and he's good enough if he improves? But surely he's sat there thinking, this is getting ridiculous now. Everything's just sort of stuck. It feels like a real roadblock at the moment.
Publicly, he won't say it.
Yeah.
Because he's not that kind of manager, and he won't complain about, whether they're making signings or not, and always maintains publicly that he's happy if anyone under contract wants to stay at Manchester United as long as they want to fight for their place. He's happy with that, and he wants to engender that kind of competition in the squad. However, we do know that, there have been initial talks with Bayern Munich over Pavard, over Harry Maguire. So they obviously want to do these deals. So publicly, he can say one thing. Privately, I don't know him that well, but privately, I'm sure he's thinking he wants to do those deals because the interest is there in players like Pavard and Sofyan Amrabat as well. But, the season started and he hasn't got them yet.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask you about Pavard as well, obviously. There were these initial talks. What is the current status of that deal? Are United planning on going back there? Is that is that something that the player wants? What do you know about that?
Man United want him. Benjamin Pavard wants to go to Manchester United. He's entered the final year of his contract. It doesn't look like he's going to sign a new contract. Bayern Munich would happily do the deal because he's entered the final year of his contract. Erik Ten Hag really likes the player. But as I said before, it's likely, not 100%, but likely to depend on departures. And if there was to be a departure, for example, like Harry Maguire, that would mean there's a space in the central defensive department and they get enough money to be able to go to Bayern Munich with a realistic deal, then yes, it still can be done. Eric Bailly is another one who is not in the plans, but he hasn't been in the plans at all under Eric Ten Hag. So people could say, well, look, there's a space in the central defensive department if and when he leaves. He's not going to go to Al Nassr now, it doesn't seem, because they're going for Aymeric Laporte. He had an offer from Besiktas, which he's didn't want to take up. So he's still a United player, but he's not in the plans, number one, and he's likely to leave if a deal can be done. But that won't necessarily be the space that needs to be created for someone else to come in, because he really wasn't in the equation anyway. I'm just mentioning it to you now, and we weren't even talking about Eric Bailly being as part of the one of the four or whatever. You know, he's not even in the pecking order, it seems, at the moment. So if they can get some money from him, yes, it would help. But I think they would likely need departures in the central defensive area and the central midfield area if they're to get those two targets that we've been talking about in Pavard and Amrabat. Yeah.
It seems as though the only real sort of big money players, like you mentioned before, McTominay and Maguire, but there are other players, and just to sort of quickly go through them, because like you said, some of them aren't really in the managers. Like Phil Jones, when he left, he didn't need replacing because he wasn't in the squad anyway. But you mentioned Eric Bailly there, so we can sort of move past that one. Then there's Donny van der Beek is another one who looks like he could be leaving, but the question would be, what kind of money would we get for him? And also in the last few days, surprisingly, and this leads on to my next question as well, which I'll get to afterwards, Anthony Martial again has been rumoured with leaving, which is I'm slightly surprised by, because as it stands, he's the only striker United have got that's ever played a game for us. I know we've got Højlund in there, but he couldn't be less proven for United. He's never played. So Donny first, is he going to leave, and roughly, will that sort of contribute to a fee, to a potential new player? And Martial as well, is there a chance he could still go?
With Donny van der Beek, I think United are looking at viable exit options for him. Real Sociedad had been in talks. I'm not sure how far along that is now, because there seems to be a rumour of another player that they're getting from Spartak Moscow, which could impact any potential deal for Donny van der Beek. But I think that Real Sociedad's preference was a loan with an option, maybe an option that triggers into an obligation for van der Beek. So, you get a loan fee, you get the wages off the bill, not so much, hard, solid cash for someone like Donny van der Beek. Right. With regard to Anthony Martial, I can only go by what Eric Ten Hag keeps saying publicly, that United are a better team when he plays. And at the moment, you've got a situation where Højlund is just getting into fitness. And Marcus Rashford, a lot of United fans I speak to, they don't like seeing him in the central striker role. And they prefer him on the left. And if you think about what happened on Monday, yes, a lot of people were talking about how, weak United's midfield looked when Wolves attacked and, exposing the defence. But going up front, you almost lost the strengths of two players with Marcus Rashford, losing him from the left and playing him down the middle. So, as it stands, I think there's been lots of rumours about Martial leaving in the past few years, but not so much under Eric Ten Hag, because publicly, at least, he always says he likes him. He had a fantastic pre-season last season, but then he had all those injuries, didn't he? Maybe it might work the other way this time. Not a great pre-season, if at all, because he barely played. I don't know whether he played at all. And coming into this season, he started on the bench, unused substitute against Wolves, but he was still part of that squad, wasn't he? So be interesting to see what happens. If he just goes in with Højlund for the entire season, would be quite a risk, you'd have to say, if Rashford is the realistic only guy who could substitute for Højlund if he's not fit. So I think you'd probably want Martial or another striker in there to come in.
Well, on that other striker then, that again, rumours in the last sort of couple of days, or really last night is when I first saw it, that Ten Hag is now demanding, as you see on all of these tweets, but maybe asking for another striker as well, another option. Is that something that you've heard?
At the outset of the transfer window, we thought that he might want to bring in two strikers. One really experienced, been there, done it, and we're talking about someone like Harry Kane, and then someone who can learn from someone like Harry Kane, maybe like a Rasmus Højlund. But what's transpired now, because of, the financial situation that United find themselves in and trying to strengthen in other areas, it's going to be very difficult to have done a couple of deals like that unless there was wholesale sales that were bringing in huge money. And we've seen in recent history, United haven't really been the best at being able to do that. Tying players down on long contracts, and when it comes to selling them, they end up being a kind of a mishmash of loans, options, and not really getting the big money and maintaining values of players as compared to when they bought them. So that's been the real issue for United, not, bringing the players in. They've been ready to do deals with players. It's just being able to streamline that squad enough and recouping enough money to be able to really regenerate that squad. So striker-wise, I'm sure Erik ten Hag would want to bring another one in. I wonder whether it's going to be one of those options where it's a more experienced striker and it's maybe a loan deal just to help Højlund along. And then what happens to Martial then? But as it stands, I'd be surprised if they let Martial go, given Højlund's the only one there at the minute.
Yeah, it's bizarre how bad United have been at selling players over the years, isn't it? When you think Chelsea, so a team that over the last 5 or 6 years have had similar league finishes to United, bopping in around at the top 4, and yet they consistently manage to sell 50, 60, 70 million quid's worth of players every summer. And United are going, can we have 2 million quid for Donny van de Beek, please, who we bought for 40 million only a couple of years ago. But thank you, Dharmesh, for coming on. Just finally, last question. Is there any other names we should be aware of? Is there any other... I've heard Pavard, I think Todibo in the past we've mentioned as well. Is there anyone else? Onana's come into the fold in the last few days. Is there anyone else that you've heard that you think, just keep an eye on this guy, because if we get some money from selling players, maybe there'll be an option there?
Those are the ones that I've heard about. There could be other names that we don't know about just yet. I would just keep an eye on a goalkeeper as well.
Okay.
United have got that situation where Andre Onana's the number 1 and Dean Henderson was on the bench. Now I'm told that Nottingham Forest still want him, and talks were continuing over a loan with an obligation. But look, David De Gea's gone, Jack Butland's gone from last season, and Kovar has completed a permanent deal now to buy Leverkusen. Tom Heaton is currently injured. The only way now that Dean Henderson probably would be allowed to leave is if another goalkeeper came in. So that might be one to keep an eye on, or whether that would be fast forwarded into January, because as it stands, it's quite a delicate situation in United's goalkeeping department just now, because they've lost a few and Heaton is injured. So literally it's Onana and Dean Henderson. Not an ideal scenario for Henderson, because I'm sure he wanted that move. I think United and Forest wanted that move as well. But I think circumstances have dictated that that's just got to be put on hold just now, unless United can bring in another goalkeeper and then do the deal with Forest.
Very interesting. Right, Dharmesh, thank you for coming on once again. Hopefully we'll speak to you again before the end of the window. We will be speaking to you again, excuse me, before the end of the window. Thank you for watching at home. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. This has been a one-on-one interview with Dharmesh Sheth from Sky Sports News. We'll see you in a bit.